Let's rock, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Hayes, and today we're going back to 2001 and replaying the intense gothic action game Devil May Cry. So grab your guns, crank up the rock music, and get ready to fill your dark soul with light as we fight our way through Malay Island, stop Mundus, and then ask the question, Devil May Cry, was it any good? Before we get started, a big thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. More on how you can support at the end. For now, let's rock. I had this game when I was younger, and I played it to death. I loved this game. Even as a kid, I knew there was something special about it, but there were moments when I sat back and I questioned what some characters said, or how one event logically linked to the next, or how the camera was working. I knew it wasn't perfect, so I was really excited to get this replay underway. I'm going to dive into the mechanics of the game, the plot, the story, the gameplay, all the meta design elements that help make this game a cult classic, while also discussing and dissecting some of its glaring weaknesses that people seem to forget about. Then we'll get to watch one of the greatest worst moments in video game voice acting history. Devil May Cry starts off with a text crawl telling you about the legendary Dark Knight Sparda, a demon who fought against other demons because he thought humans were kinda cool, and then we're introduced to Sparda's son, Dante. Dante runs a business hunting down supernatural creatures, and his pleasant evening sitting doing nothing is interrupted by Trish ramming a motorbike through the front door. We then get some fantastic characterization in only a few seconds.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
Well, what do we have here? Nature calls? It's in the back.
So, you must be the handyman who'll take any dirty job. Am I correct?
Almost. I only take special jobs, if you know what I mean.
You're the man who lost a mother and a brother to evil 20 years ago. The son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda, Mr. Dante.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Are you really the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda? Didn't your daddy teach you how to use a sword?
A sword. Haha. Time to go to work, guys.
Okay, from a writing point of view, this is great. Dante is relaxed, he's interrupted, and his immediate response is to be sarcastic. This means his guard is down and he gets beaten up for it, only to pull the fight back to his side when he starts paying attention and realizes this is actually a challenge. This tells you so much about Dante in just one cutscene. He's chilled out, he's not easily intimidated, literally a devil may care attitude, but this leads to him not assessing a threat correctly and being hit. He isn't omniscient, and that's precisely why playing as him feels so rewarding. Dante is powerful when he focuses and pays attention, but he can still very easily die. And this characterization translates into the combat system exceptionally well. You can die to a basic enemy, or you can finish the whole game without being hit. It's up to you how you focus, and we'll dive into the complexities of the combat system later. Trish tells Dante the Dark Lord Mundus is being resurrected on Malay Island and they should go and stop him, so off they pop. Why does Dante so eagerly follow Trish? Well, because Trish looks exactly like Dante's dead mother, which is an issue we'll look at later. You start the game on the coastal edge of the island and get to run around and jump a bit, and then you head inside the main castle and Mission 1 begins. Devil May Cry is broken down into 27 individual missions, some taking upwards of 20 minutes, others can be finished in only 2. And while all the missions take place on the castle or island somewhere, they all have limited exploration within them. You can backtrack, and doing so sometimes unlocks secret missions, but it's mostly a linear adventure, and you'll be told what the basic goal of each mission is. Usually find an item or open a door to progress, then you're given enough guidance to set you on the right path, or limited enough options that you can't get too lost. After each mission is done, you're given a rating based on how fast you completed it, how many enemies you killed, how much damage you took, and how many items you used. Achieving that fabled S rank is, well, it's hard. I finished most missions with a C. C for consistent. Now let's talk about controls and camera angles, and I'm just going to rip this band-aid off straight away. This is the game's biggest weakness. The control system of Dante is great. Left analog stick moves, circle is melee attack, triangle is jump, you can double jump off walls or pull yourself up onto ledges, holding R1 readies your ranged weapon and square shoots, and while holding R1 pressing triangle in a direction makes your dodge roll. It's not super responsive, but it is there. General movement is fine, it's responsive, it feels good. And the camera angles for the whole game are gorgeous. You've got sweeping cinematic shots of the coast, grand cathedrals, open cliff sides, haunted castles, evil pirate ships. The locations in the game are vast and varied, they're all gorgeous. The environmental design in Devil May Cry is stunningly good. The attention to detail in the small motifs is stellar. Each area is graphically distinct, the colour palette is well chosen, the limited use of smoke and lighting effects keeps the game looking interesting. You can jump to any level of Devil May Cry and you'd be thinking, wow, this looks awesome. And all the camera angles are designed to show off the landscape to the best of their ability, to enhance the feeling that each individual environment is meant to give you. So with a great movement system and a great camera system, where's the issue? Well, you see, these systems are individually great, but together they don't work that well. Devil May Cry 1 actually started life as a Resident Evil game. Malay Island was meant to be a gothic horror setting for a classic Resident Evil style horror adventure, but it was repurposed as an action game. Despite changing genres, they kept the camera style of having fixed camera points in the level, and they gave the player no camera control. If you've played Resident Evil or Dino Crisis, you will know how this camera system works, and there's a reason it works so well for those types of games. In horror games with limited movement like Resident Evil, the camera is angled to keep the action in focus and to show off the beautiful landscape or the environment, and this works fine in slower games because your survival doesn't rely on split-second action gameplay, it relies on navigation and planning, and it's highly unlikely the enemies, which usually move slowly, are ever going to jump out of the pre-established frame. But Devil May Cry is an action game, and the movement and combat systems have you jumping around all over the place, and this often means you are shooting at, slashing at, or being attacked by enemies who have wandered off camera and the camera angle hasn't changed to show them, meaning you need to change areas to bring them back into view. The movement and the combat system is a player-controlled feature, but the camera angle is a game-controlled feature, and they don't enhance each other. In some cases, they actively detract because the camera angle is designed to focus on the cinematic ideal of where the action should be happening, not where it actually is happening. In a standard action game, the camera follows the action, not the environment, because the action is the primary gameplay loop. In an exploration game, the camera enhances the environment the players explore around. What you've got here is a combination of both of them. Now, when it works and the action takes place in the correct place, it's absolutely beautiful. But it doesn't work all the time, and this is a huge issue with the later fights in the game. Perhaps the biggest issue with having fixed camera angles in an action game is when you're holding left and running left, and then the angle switches and you're still holding left, but you're now running down, because Dante's direction is respected in relation to the previous angle's last known input. But in a game requiring lots of fast-paced inputs, every camera angle switch needs you to release the analog stick to reset your full range of movement. It's not game-breaking design, but it does highlight how the fixed camera style and the action gameplay style don't always gel well together, or they take a lot of extra planning to make sure you aren't switching angles in the middle of a fight. This becomes so much more obvious in the platforming sections. Dante controls fine, but controlling him accurately is difficult when the camera angle isn't just working with you, trying to line up an accurate jump when the camera is at a strange jaunty angle, and you're jumping at an odd diagonal and is different to judge depth, just gets really frustrating. The game even proves that it can do platforming in the later sections when the camera swings behind you to allow you to easily line up and time a jump, allowing for some lovely exploration sections free of stress. But later in in the game, you're going to have to make harder jumps with worse angles. There's very little consistency with how the game treats the ease of access from a camera point of view when the player is forced to do platforming. While you're exploring the early sections of Malay Island, the Resident Evil similarities really ramp up, needing to find items and keys to open doors with the text scrolling across the screen. The whole island is basically one giant puzzle to be solved, and some of the logic of some of the solves is questionable at best. We make our way into the grand main entrance hall, and in classic Resident Evil style, nothing happens yet. We need to explore and find some keys to open some doors, and to guide us we follow these red orbs. So red orbs are the currency you'll use to upgrade your weapons and buy items in the shop. We'll look at the shop system later when we get to it. Along with red orbs, you've also got blue orbs. Collect 4 blue fragments to increase your health, and yellow orbs, which are your lives. If you die, you'll burn through a yellow orb and start the mission again. Purple orbs increase the size of your devil trigger gauge, which is your Super Saiyan mode. One of the best aspects of Devil May Cry's early game design is just how much is relevant later. The giant lance held by the opening room statue that dominates the room, that's important. The iron portcullis, this matters. Even the first enemy room will be revisited later. Devil May Cry isn't a big game. In fact, I finished the entire thing in about 6 hours, but it is an extremely dense game. There's very little wasted space. Locations are reused well, and the exploration is a well-designed gameplay aspect right up until they start using portals at the end, but more on that later. Now let's get into combat. And before we look at the combat system itself, I want to discuss an absolutely fantastic bit of game design I didn't even notice until I wrote this review. At the start of the game, there are no enemies, nothing attacks you. Then you find a creepy marionette holding a key, so you take the key, and when you turn to leave, the marionette comes to life and attacks you with its own little introduction movie. Then later in the game, you find a key in a painting. You take the key, and the painting comes to life and attacks you with its own little introduction movie. Then you destroy a statue, which releases a shadow cat, which attacks you again. Then you disturb a sewer grate by taking an item from it, and this releases a load of bugs which attack you. Then in the nightmare world, you disturb the philosopher's egg, and this summons the super creepy nobodies which attack you. In Devil May Cry, you are responsible for stuff attacking you. You made it happen. You choose to touch something or to take something. Every encounter, every boss fight is a direct result of you doing something. It's never just, oh, here's a new enemy. It's, you have specifically done something which has annoyed this enemy in this location. And every single new enemy is introduced in their own little cutscene. Devil May Cry treats each enemy as a spectacle, a moment to be celebrated, and it's this care for presentation and introduction which makes fighting them feel special. You're not just killing a random enemy, you're killing something that has a personal vendetta against you that you made happen. This is another design taken from Resident Evil. As a new zombie appears, a new cutscene will happen. Remember the licker in Resident Evil 2 creeping along the ceiling? Every enemy in Devil May Cry is afforded the same courtesy as the player, a short intro sequence, because Devil May Cry is a horror game, but you are one of the scary things as well. Remember how I mentioned the camera favours the cinematic? Look at the intro of these ice lizards. It's aesthetically beautiful. Framed, flanking the moon, gorgeous to watch. Then the fight happens, and it's kinda hard to keep up with. Moments of systems working together, and then moments of systems working against each other. So let's talk about the combat. I want to discuss it in general, then go into specifics when we find each weapon. Throughout the game, you'll use 4 different melee weapons and a few guns. I'll discuss the pros and cons of each one as we find it. Let's start with melee. Dante starts with his sword, Force Edge. Pressing circle attacks and pressing it 3 times does a nice little combo. But button mashing is the least effective way to play this game, and I love it for this. Devil May Cry is an action game, but it's an action game that rewards control. Mashing melee attack will limit you to 1 combo forever, and it's not that good. The other combos are better, and they're unlocked by pressing the same button, but slower. 3 attacks is a combo, 2 attacks, short pause, 5 attacks is a combo, and 2 attacks, long pause, 7 attacks does a long stabby chain ending with a big hit. And then you've got directional moves. Holding R1 readies your guns, but it also unlocks a new melee attack mode. Hold R1, face an enemy, pull away from the enemy, and press attack, and you'll launch them into the air. And this launch can be tagged on the end of a long combo chain. So you combine this with the ability to buy other attacks at the shops, and then dodge roll behind an enemy, and switch guns and attack while in the air, and you'll find that Devil May Cry 1 has a great deal of adaptability within its relatively limited button pool. And staying calm enough to pull off some of the awesome combos makes you feel awesome as well. It's just a shame the camera doesn't always capture the true awesomeness of what you're doing as well as it should do. Along with melee weapons, you've got guns. Hold R1, then mash square to shoot with your basic pistols. You start the game with ebony and ivory, which fire as fast as you can press the button. This also gives us the traditional juggle. Smack an enemy into the air, then just shoot them as fast as you can to keep them there. Effective and satisfying. And it increases your coolness rating. What you will discover is enemies can block you, or block your bullets, or deflect your attacks, and they will do this often. And when they do, a counter attack is coming, so you need to jump or roll away fast, because a single hit from an enemy is a large chunk of your health. And sometimes they'll jump on you if you get too close and just start stabbing. Combat is a deadly dance. If you rush in with no control, you'll die. And oh, this random plane in this room, remember this, it will matter later. A lot. Mission 2 starts and tells you to open the cathedral, and my question is this: how do you know? Like, no one has told you? Dante just knows, oh yes, this place I've never been, best go through the cathedral. Before each mission you can power up. This means spending the red orbs you've found on weapon upgrades such as new moves, or items like the vitality stars which refill your health, or devil stars which refill your devil trigger, which are used from the menu. We'll see those later. Or full purple, blue or yellow orbs. You can also access the shop in-game via these gold statues of a guy holding a giant hourglass. Let's just talk about the music. It's brilliant. You've got this juxtaposition of gothic ambience in places like the central hall or the gloomy corridors, using chanting, pipes, organs, low strings with deep, unsettling reverb, which really helps cement the tone of horror. And then you've got this kick-ass rock music whenever combat's happening to really drive home who Dante is as a character. Yes, the situation you're in is meant to be terrifying, but Dante is action. He's excitement. And because the music is so action-packed, it's very easy to lose yourself to the energy and button mash, but we've seen that's not the best way to fight. So you end up in this zen-like trance of hearing and enjoying the fast-paced music while calmly slicing and dicing your enemies apart. And it's this mixture of fast action design combined with focused player skill that helps you understand what playing as Dante truly means. It means focused action that you're in control of. Eventually you'll find your first new weapon, the electrical sword Alistar, and you probably remember this cutscene, so let's just enjoy it together. That cutscene just perfectly encapsulates what the original Devil May Cry is. Head-shakingly dumb and jaw-droppingly awesome. Pulling the entire crossguard through your body and neck is done. You would die, but then having shards of glass raining down as you burst through them with electricity and swinging your sword around in slow motion, that is such a cool shot. The Alistar Sword has the same moveset as Force Edge and will remain similar in power right up until we buy the Air Raid Devil Trigger attack later, which will break the entire game. Grab a key from this painting, it looks evil but nothing happens yet, and then we find the shotgun, and let me show you a trick with the shotgun. Holding R1 readies your weapon and pressing fire fires the shotgun, but the shotgun needs to reload after each shot, giving it a relatively low rate of fire. But if you hold R1, fire, then release R1, then instantly press it again and fire again, you can fire without needing to reload, and yes, this is a lot of quick button presses, but it doubles the rate of the shotgun and lets you shred through the early game enemies. You are welcome. If you did this too, you now have to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Loop back around to the library via a hidden corridor. There are lots of these in the early game, and this time the painting comes to life and we meet the scissor ghosts, black cloaks with masks and giant scissors that can just fly through scenery. And even when you do kill them, they throw their scissors at you. Now, you'll notice there's a white ghostly layer over the door of skulls. Devil May Cry has several required combat encounters, and you can only move on when you've killed every enemy. And once they're all dead, the ghostly hand shatters this blockade. Run across this bridge, grab an item, run back and get struck by lightning. This is a feature you'll see a lot. Going somewhere is usually fine, getting back is often not fine. This drops us into an underwater section where our health constantly drains. Quick note, you cannot die from this health drain effect, but it will reduce you to 1 health. And now we meet the first voiced boss, Phantom.
Surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours. You leave anything.
That was an excellent introduction. We have a cool entrance, a quick personality setup, Dante's signature sarcastic response showing he's probably about to underestimate something, and then the cutscene transitions into the fight. Phantom can run, jump, has a ranged meteor attack, area denial, lava columns, a weak spot on its back. Devil May Cry is a spectacle fighter, and when you win, Phantom doesn't die, he just crawls away, and you know he'll be back, and our first recurring villain is set up. So we leave and oh, he's already back chasing us, and we run away, leaping over fireballs. And when you now return to this corridor, the columns are all smashed. I love this. Permanent environmental damage and changing caused during a playable in-game event. Not just a cutscene. You played through this. You know why they're broken. This is great design. So along with combat, Devil May Cry is essentially a linear puzzle game. This section needs me to hit this target, to raise this pillar, to grab this ceremonial sword, to unlock this melancholy soul. It's a sequence of linear steps, but each step taken alone makes very little sense because you wouldn't know what to do with it. But the game distracts you with another boss fight, this currently nameless Dark Knight. The advantage of having a little cutscene intro to each enemy is you can set up a personality through the enemy's actions. Like how this guy opens the doors and motions you to join him outside. Like, yeah, he wants to kill you, but he's going to be gentlemanly about it. This fight shows what the game could be if the camera and combat work together all the time. The camera angle here gives you a complete view of the battle, and you can always see both yourself and the enemy, and makes controlling the flow of action super easy. This is one of the best fights in the game because the player controlled mechanics and the game controlled mechanics match up so well pretty much the entire time. Now this fight ends up with us losing and being pushed up against the wall, but before the final blow can be dealt, our amulet falls into view and the Dark Knight sees it, panics and flees, setting up a plot point for later. From a wide open boss arena to a specifically awkward and small arena in the sewers, Devil May Cry knows how to manipulate you into fighting in different ways by changing the landscape of the fight. You can't run away if there's nowhere to run away to. Better get used to dodging and war jumping because that's how you need to kill this enemy. And now we have enough orbs to level up Alistar and buy the only attack we'll be using for the rest of the entire game: Air Raid. When you fight, you'll build up your Devil Trigger gauge, and once 3 symbols are full, pressing L1 activates it and slowly drains the symbols. While it's active, you move faster, hit harder, and recover your health. You also can't be knocked backwards while in Devil Trigger mode, meaning you can tank enemy hits and force your own damage through. Now you'll also gain access to special weapon attacks, and Alistar has Air Raid. Once you've bought it, jump into the air, press R1 in Devil Trigger mode, and you'll start flying. Now just hammer square and you'll blast enemies with bolts of lightning, doing massive damage and interrupting their attacks. This is basically the most overpowered tactic for the rest of the game. You can cheese mobs, elites and bosses by just building up Devil Trigger, then air raiding everything to death. I am not ashamed to say this is how I basically killed everything. If in doubt, air raid. Just like how when Phantom shows up again later, in a much more open arena, he's no match for air raid, and when he dies, he falls through the roof onto the giant lance of the statue from the main room at the start. What a fantastic use of the visually striking architecture from the beginning of the game. This is what I mean when I say the game is dense. Everything loops back to be relevant later. Then we find a grenade launcher, which is awesome and quite useful for mobs, but because the grenades have travel time, unlike the pistols which are instant hit, enemies can and will dodge your grenades. Once we're outside the castle, this courtyard has multiple paths we could take, but we are guided with these handy-dandy landing lights. I like this. It's a visual, non-intrusive way of saying, hey, go this way, while also letting you explore if you don't want to go that way. This is the perfect amount of hand-holding. Advice without demands. This is the platforming bit where the camera matches up. It's lovely. It actually makes me even more annoyed that they clearly know how to design a competent platforming system, they just didn't. And at the top of this platform, we get Ifrit, the Flame Gloves. The Ifrit Gloves have the same 3 basic attacks. Your combo choice here is how long you hold the attack for to power it up before you hit. The gloves are fine for slower enemies or for breaking through armoured foes. Sometimes the flying kick is good and you can use them to take out the ice demons later, but honestly you will end up using Alistar for most of the game because of air raid. Next boss, a giant bird. And again, awesome design, great arena, lovely attacks, lasers, lightning and gust of wind, super fun fight. And again, you don't actually kill it first time, setting up another rival. Devil May Cry does that a lot and I think it works. You fight a boss, but then the boss retreats instead of dying, because they're not stupid. They know that running away and trying again later is a better choice than fighting you to the death if they're losing. This is why when you finally do kill bosses in this game, it's so damn satisfying because they've escaped you so many times. The kill is cathartic. This is one of the many reasons Devil May Cry 2 sucks, because it does nothing the first game did well, but that is a whole other video. Now you've got to use the flame gauntlets to punch this fire to open the door. Mechanical use of weapons to advance the game outside of combat. Good design. Now a puzzle. Navigate this canyon. You need to follow the white orb and choose the path that it chooses, and every single screen looks exactly the same, so you have to rely on the orb. But the orb also gets eaten by enemies, so you need to kill them to free it. This is a nice change of pace. Grab this taxidermied brain and use it to solve a puzzle, and also a super small bit of camera work here that I absolutely love and need to point out. When you enter this cove in the distance, the camera doesn't cut to another angle, it zooms up to meet you and then maintains a new angle. This would have taken a lot more effort than just instantly cutting to this new angle. Just want to let you know, whoever made this zoom, I noticed. Rematch with this Dark Knight and we get to see exactly how a camera angle shouldn't operate. The first fight was so good and this is the opposite. Static camera angles prioritizing cinematic landscape shots over action, foreground objects obscuring vision, lack of depth perception making jumping into platforms awkward, invisible walls preventing you from climbing on things. Perfect example of great combat system and great camera system not being great for each other. Finish this dude off using the holy water item because I'm fed up of fighting the camera, and now the completely pointless underwater section. About halfway into the game you find a pirate ship which looks awesome, and then on it you find a needle gun, the only gun that can be used underwater, and then you swim. The underwater section is a first-person swimming bit where you try to navigate the hold of a well-stocked pirate ship, and while underwater you'll be attacked and your only defense is shooting the needle gun, which is very boring. It has a slight knockback and then you just wait for the enemy to die. No one has ever said, "Oh, Devil May Cry 1, I love that game," especially the underwater bit. This part is antithetical to what Devil May Cry is. It's dull, you turn far too slowly, it's quiet, it's awkward to navigate, and your combat choices are reduced to 1. Shoot the needle gun. You could remove this from the game and nobody would miss it. I'm willing to bet a few of you who played this game a long time ago forgot this bit was even in the game. Now above the water, the ship design is amazing, and you fight a powered up version of the Scissor Whip. This one has multiple sides, and then you can explore the ship, climbing up the various masts and rigging, and running to the extremities to find orbs. This is a gorgeous vertical level, and the vertical design space hasn't really been explored much yet, so it's nice to see they took some time to do that here, but then again, the camera and the gameplay clash. The bird boss is back, flying around, zapping you with lasers, sending electrical beams at you, but you lose track of it because it flies off and the camera doesn't follow it, and you can't prepare for attacks that you can't see. But one of its attacks flings you up into the air, so they've clearly planned to use the verticality of this stage as a fight mechanic, they just haven't planned the camera to take advantage of that. excellent fight, subpar camera, again. Oh good, more mandatory underwater combat. Now I'm not sure, but this looks like a trap. If there's one bit that perfectly shows how your demise is your fault, this is it. You're standing on a rotating spiked floor with a choice of do you want to pull the skeleton's arm, which is also a lever. And the moment you do, bad things happen, and you have only yourself to blame. Here's a nice section. You grab a lump of lumite, which gives you a localized glow, and then the PlayStation 2 gets to show off the graphical power by rendering real-time lighting effects and shadows based on your position. This section isn't very long. And it's here I begin to realise Devil May Cry is a game full of ideas not fully explored. The lighting mechanic, the swimming mechanic, the skeleton dragon we'll see later, it feels like a first draft of cool mechanical ideas not yet fleshed out. Here's a secret gun that you'll never use. Ignore the main path, fly over a bit using air raid and find the Nightmare Beta, a laser gun which you can charge up to fire, and the lasers bounce, but firing it drains your devil trigger. Cool idea, but I couldn't find a place in the game that using this is any better than just using devil trigger normally. The bird now returns for the third fight. The arena is awesome, the mechanics are awesome, the camera angle is goddamn terrible. Look, the bird uses this attack. It throws columns of lightning toward you and you need to sidestep, but you don't know which way to sidestep because the camera isn't behind you. And because the lightning is coming at you at a wall, we don't know where to go. Sometimes it works, most of the times it doesn't, and the fight goes from epic and enjoyable to unseen or frustrating. But as usual, just air raid your way through. And now the bird falls down, calls out to Mundus to grant it the strength to finish us off, and it turns out Mundus isn't exactly forgiving.
Master, grant me one last surge of power, the power to finish him. Master Mundus,
You beat him. Maybe it was too easy for you.
Mundus. His heinous ways make me sick, killing even his own, like they were nothing. He's the one that took the life of my mother, my brother, and Shirley. My mother used to always tell me that my father was a man who fought for the weak. He had courage and a righteous heart. In the name of my father, I will kill Mundus.
A little bit more story. Mundus killed Dante's mum and brother, so now we know why Dante was so eager to take the job. Conveniently, the column that crushed the griffin was also a lift, so just gotta jump onto that and we can carry on the game. Just gonna jump up here. Just gonna climb. Jump onto the... Just gonna jump there. There we go. First time. Return to the castle and ooh, it's all dark. And oh, the door from the start is gone. Right, evil work is afoot. With the griffin dead, the game decided we needed a new reoccurring boss, so how about a big pile of goo? This is the nightmare boss. It is a big pile of sludge until you hit one of the targets around the edge enough to activate the lights where it shows you its true form. Remember the nightmare beta gun we picked up earlier? This is a big version of that gun. The nightmare fight is, well, a nightmare. There's lots of smaller machine gun style lasers to knock you back, a big hyper damaging laser, solid spikes that stab out in every direction, and the only way to hurt it is to wait for the crystal core to be exposed and hit it. But when the core is exposed, it fires little homing missiles at you, making doing this really hard. One issue this fight highlights is the combat has a soft lock-on system. When you're near to an enemy and you attack, your attack will be drawn to that enemy. So if you run to attack the button on the wall that you need to attack, but you're also kind of close to the boss, your attacks will be drawn away from the button and toward the boss, and this happens a lot despite the fact you don't want it to. It's the game trying to help you, but it gets it wrong. Nightmare dealt with back across the creepy bridge, and now something I think that's really cool on the surface but lazy when you analyse it mechanically. These two paintings now appear as portals, and you jump through them to get teleported to a place you've been before to solve more puzzles in this new evil version of the castle. But ask yourself this: why? I think it's because it's easier to design smaller sections of an evil castle than to remake the whole thing with an evil version. I think honestly they might be using the portal mechanic to save on development time, because you don't need to make travel interesting if you don't need to make travel. This becomes even more apparent later when they go from using actual paintings as portals to just black holes with red edging to take you from set piece to set piece. The opening of the game is so good because the exploration and seeing how everything connects together actually matters, unlocking shortcuts and feeling like you were learning the layout of an actual castle. And the end game loses that connected charm by replacing hidden shortcuts with just teleport circles. Another mechanic used only once: this skeleton dragon shoots fireballs at you and you have to hit them back. It's a cool concept, it's just not explored enough. It would be cool to see this more. I do like how you then need to jump across invisible platforms and you need to wait for the flash of lightning outside to light them up. This is a great use of the established storm weather effect to influence platforming mechanics. It's almost like fluff and form are meeting. Final showdown with the Dark Knight in the castle throne room. We win and the Dark Knight drops an amulet identical to our own, and we discover the secret. The Dark Knight was actually Virgil, Dante's brother. The names, by the way, come from the Divine Comedy, where the poet Dante is guided through the many layers of hell by his guide Virgil. Another cutscene shows Mundus talking to Trish because she's actually evil, and this made me question, hang on, why? What's Mundus's goal? He sent Trish to come and get us, but Mundus clearly doesn't want Dante here, so why did he make Trish in the image of Dante's mother and send her to fetch him? If Mundus was resurrecting and Dante is literally the only person capable of stopping you, why would you specifically summon him to your island? Why wouldn't you just resurrect until you're at full health and then go and kill Dante? Anyway, strange plot points aside, the amulet now joins with our own amulet and upgrades the Force Edge sword into Sparda, the final form of the blade, which looks and sounds awesome, but doesn't have air raid, so will never be used. Fight the Nightmare again, it has new attacks and is an absolute pain to beat because there's so much going on and the softlock system keeps pulling my attacks away from the buttons. We use an item that Virgil dropped to enter the mirror world, steal an egg, and get attacked by some of the creepiest enemies in the game, the Nobodies. They just look wrong, they move in the wrong way, and they sound wrong, and I love this enemy design. So we defeat them, then we stare into the giant sky anus, and then we return to the chapel and use the power of the egg we stole to descend into the Underworld. The Underworld is gorgeous. It is horrific. It's made of flesh. It's memorable. It's organic. It's a living, breathing organism dedicated to torture and pain. It is both the prison and the prisoner. It is a super cool design of hell. Fight the Nightmare for the final time in this really cool rune-clad room, and just as we're about to win, Trish blasts us with lightning. So now the final phase means we are fighting Nightmare with a host of new attacks and avoiding Trish's lightning. The difficulty really ramps up here. Devil May Cry is not an easy game. Kill Nightmare, then watch a cutscene showing Trish about to be crushed by falling rocks, but we push her out the way because she reminds Dante of his mum, and then we set off to kill Mundus. One final platforming level, which is just awful because the camera is determined to make me fall, then we enter an absolutely stunning boss room. A grand white cathedral. This is the first time the game has used a gleaming bright white colour palette, so you know they've been saving it for here. And unfortunately, you're only in this room for about 10 seconds and a cutscene.
Why my mother?
That useless being? If you need a mother, I can create it. As many as you want. Just like I created Trish.
Silence!
Right, the final fight isn't like anything in the rest of the game. It's an on-rails shoot-'em-up where Dante has unlocked his winged devil form and blasts energy balls at Mundus in the distance. Also, the cathedral has faded away and we're in space. Right. You need to destroy the defense barrier Mundus creates, dodge the incoming laser javelins, and then use your devil trigger to launch a dragon at Mundus. I think they gave up trying to be consistent here and just went with whatever sounded cool. Kill the first form, which is relatively easy, and then onto the second, and oh my god, this form is much harder. Now you're in a circular arena, and you have to activate Devil Trigger to launch fireballs at him, or jump up on the rotating steps to melee him, but Mundus is so much more difficult in this form. I died so many times. This form took me 30 minutes of attempts to kill, because he's got massive dragon attacks, he's got lasers, he's got balls that spin around the arena and shoot other lasers at you, he's got massive huge meteors that fall from the sky. Mundus wants you dead in this form, but it's worth it, because after killing him, we get to watch and listen to this absolutely legendarily bad cutscene. Sit back and enjoy.
I should have saved you. I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Despite that being a very good place to end the game on a very high note, it's not over. We escape the underworld, flee back to the castle, but then get dropped into the sewers and have to fight yet another form of Mundus, which is apparently made out of hands, eyeballs, and cheese. He crawls toward us, we keep shooting, eventually Trish appears and reminds us to believe in ourselves, so we do. We pull the trigger extra hard, imbue the bullets with the power of friendship, fire a super shot into Mundus, and he dies. And then we're about to be crushed to death, but we escape the island by using the plane at the start of the game. Remember that plane, and we fly through the tunnel. Okay, what? Just to prove a point in this section, I hit every single obstacle I could, and you still make it out. And then we get the final cutscene, which is again awful.
The sky, it's so clear, so blue.
The sky is fair. It'll always be above everyone's head, no different.
Like the sky, I feel like my heart is becoming clear.
Let's not forget, though, the Underworld's evil is still alive. They will someday return.
There's no need to worry, right? 'Cause the world has the legendary Dark Knight Dante. And his sidekick.
What was that line about the sky being fair and always above everyone's heads? Dante, you've not been a philosopher up until now. What were you getting at with that? And Trish actively referring to herself as a sidekick is just all sorts of insecure. But hey, at least we stopped Mundus. So, Devil May Cry 1, was it any good? It's short, 6 to 7 hours if you know what you're doing, relatively linear but very densely packed, at least at the start, right up until it swaps the tight navigation for teleporters. The combat is simple, but it does a lot with what it has. The variety in melee weapons and guns is nice, despite having objectively correct choices for any situation, and the camera angles really highlight the beauty of the scenery, but there are just too many times that the combat system and the camera angles do not work well with each other, leaving you fighting something off screen or dying to an unseen projectile or just thinking this could be be so much better. The music is awesome and the general environmental design is top-notch. The plot is extremely questionable, with both the individual level puzzle sections feeling quite random and Mundus overall not really having the most defined of plans. Do you want Dante there? Do you not want Dante there? Did you send Trish? Did you not send Trish? Is she good? Is she bad? What's going on with this? Overall, it's a great little game with some creeping mechanical flaws throughout that spawned a fantastic franchise that really hit its stride in Devil May Cry 3, and let's all just imagine that 2 doesn't exist, although I will review it soon. To end the review, I will award Devil May Cry 1...
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Cheers for watching. Thank you again to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter and Discord. And, as always, remember,
The Underworld's evil is still alive. They will someday return.
There's no need to worry, right? Cause the world has the legendary Dark Knight Dante and his sidekick.